can you just give us a background to what Don't Divide Us do as a group?
OK, we're a campaign group that challenges, wherever we can, divisive ideas and beliefs along race lines that are being promoted in our institutions and through kind of culture more generally.
Yes.
Because we believe that we actually, our common humanity is indivisible.
Yes.
And these ideas that are being promoted, and it's a new ideology piggybacking off of older ideas of anti-racism that most people share. That's what's got us to the point we are today. And these are being introduced in schools, which is particularly egregious, really.
I think that's what's confusing a lot of people, because a lot of the ideas that are coming into schools are branded as anti-racism. And, of course, we're all opposed to racism, and teachers have always been opposed. Well, not always, but, of late have. So where's the confusion here? How can you explain?
OK, can I explain a really important difference? I've been thinking about this a lot. But, right, the old anti-racism, if you like, was where the default assumption was Britain is an OK society and it has some problems. There was a broad belief in equality and tolerance, those Enlightenment values, and we would look around and we would see some individuals who belonged to particular groups were being discriminated against, were not being treated equally. And we fought together across ethnic lines in order to uplift those people who were disadvantaged so they would join the majority and have equal rights. The new anti-racism is the complete opposite. It is about using minorities, really appropriating, talk about cultural appropriation, appropriating the said experiences of minorities, including like myself, and using it to basically trash majority ideas and majority values by saying you're all unconsciously biased, whether you like it or not,
so
whether you intend it or not.
Those are the kinds of things that are being taught in schools, the idea of every white person is potentially complicit in white supremacy just by virtue of being white, that they are all privileged irrespective of their economic backgrounds. And we can see sometimes that this leads to open division, such as the American school, which segregated children by race after school. And that's a London-based school. It's called the American school, but it's a London-based school. And they did that for extracurricular activities. So your report now is really focusing on how commonplace these ideas are. Because when I've spoken about this in the past, people have said, but you're relying on anecdotal evidence from a few teachers that you know. And that was true.
Yes.
What does this study tell us?
Right, we did this study. We sent out 173 FOIs to councils in England and Wales.
That's Freedom of Information requests.
Yes, sorry. And that was on the back of our campaign in Brighton and Hove that I believe you've covered before. We still haven't got a proper answer about what happened in Brighton and Hove. And we thought, is this an outlier? Is this just like one council gone bonkers? Or is it more widespread? So we thought, what should we do? We didn't have the resources to contact every single school in the country, but we thought the councils are that mid-level between national legislation, national government, and then kind of on the ground locally.
Yes.
So we sent out these FOIs, Freedom of Information requests, and over half of them either didn't reply at all or their replies were really inadequate. I mean,
so they didn't want you to know?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to... the fact is that for quite a long time, since 1988, schools do have local autonomy.
Yes.
So a lot of the FOI, the councils were saying, we don't know this information, contact the individual schools.
OK. OK.
So we can't
assume.
We can't assume, but the point is that if this new anti-racism is so important that it merits this wholesale change that advocates are, saying it should, someone needs to know. We need to know so parents can know.
Well, let's give an example of something we absolutely do know, because the Brighton Council's anti-racist schools strategy, which you challenged quite openly, and all the details were there.
Yeah.
And indeed, I believe the Green councillor, Hannah Clare, I think her name was, said explicitly that it's through the lens of critical race theory. That's the way they see these things. So what are the implications? What kind of thing have Brighton been training their teachers to teach?
Yes, I mean, what they want to teach children to see colour. Anyone that's got young kids will know that they play quite amicably, and they see colour. Sometimes they don't, the other times, and they see all sorts of differences. But what this new ideology seeks to do is to make it a really important factor, and then also to attribute moral and kind of social status up or down, positive or negative.
Like oppressed or oppressor.
That's right. You're kind of placed on a grid of power. You know, this is all stuff from abstract theories, right? It does not map onto the reality of everyday life in Britain, where up to now we've had, you know, I mean, you just don't think of colour. You know, my husband's white, our children are mixed, and I do not look at my family and think of colour, and yet this is what they want people to be really hypersensitive to.
And that's the ideal of colour blindness, I suppose. Not that we don't notice that people are different, but that we don't treat them differently, right?
Well, that's right. You notice the differences. You can like or dislike or find differences boring, but you don't see them. You understand that we are not determined, that as individuals, what determines us is our own free will, is our own, you know, that's what makes us unique.
And surely that's a more powerful message for kids. I mean, and you know, critics will say, but, you know, teachers have to teach critical race theory or this kind of hyper-racialised view of the world because that's the only way we're going to break down the structures of racism that exist, that are embedded in society. What do you say about that?
Well, look, if any teacher thinks that, they're free to think that in their own time as a citizen, right? As a citizen, they can be free to think whatever they like. As a teacher, they're not. As a teacher, they have a duty and a responsibility to educate. And if they can't tell the difference between politics and education, they shouldn't be teaching. And
it's actually, I mean, you mentioned that because isn't the truth that it's against the law? The Education Act 1986, you know, says that teachers have to be impartial when it comes to these matters.
It does, but I think impartiality is quite a tricky concept. It's not very well understood. And ultimately, the problem is that education for decades has just been beleaguered by so many different bits of policy and legislation. It's completely fragmented. That's really what's allowing this stuff to come in. It's not Machiavellian people sort of pulling this. I mean, some of them are, it's true. But the conditions for allowing this to come in is the fact that it's also fragmented. It's utterly... I mean, you've just got to look at the school bills at the minute that's being discussed. It's a complete mess. There's no vision of what education should be. And if you don't have a clear vision of what you want to... you're asking your nation's teaching force to go out and do every day, then you're going to be open to all kinds of instrumental reasons and interferences, and that's what's happening now.
And what does your report, Don't Divide Us report, what are the findings in a nutshell?
Well, we're finding that, that it's very difficult for parents to find out about this. Right? I knew what I was looking for. I have had experience researching, and I found it very difficult because when you go onto councils' websites, you can come across an equality, diversity and inclusion statement that looks perfectly banal and quite boring, frankly, or certainly nothing shocking about it. But then if you then sort of do a different search and put in anti-racism and then perhaps and you find something a little bit more, oh, well, this is a bit different. This isn't what was on the main, you know, the main kind of landing page of the council. And then you kind of have to keep clicking through, and then you will find... I'm not saying everybody does this, but the fact that this is happening in a majority of the councils that we've termed biased, because they're the ones who... They see schools as, you know, places where they want to change society, and that's politics, that's not schools.
Well, that's like teachers being activists, isn't it?
Exactly.
And then,
exactly.
But then the problem you're facing, you know, even though, you know, you've got this information now, we know that it is prevalent, it's not just a few rogue schools here and there, but then it's because the unions are behind it. The National Education Union openly said we need more activist teachers.
Yep.
They were quite clear about it. They said we need to decolonise every level of the classroom. So when you have activists running the major organisations, such as the National Education Union, what hope is there to push back against it? Is it the parents that need to do something?
I think, sadly, and I've been a teacher most of my life, and actually I do believe that teachers and parents have the same interests fundamentally, but unfortunately the political context that we're in means parents have really got to, you know, start taking an interest and really caring about what their schools are teaching their children. Go in, ask your teachers what is being taught in assemblies, ask to see the materials that they're using. One of our recommendations is that schools should be mandated to publish all the third-party providers on their websites. They have to publish a lot of other information. They should do this as well. And if you find any parents out there, and teachers, we are getting teachers coming to us now, a lot more, who they do not want to be doing this, send in material, send in examples, because that will help us get a better, finer grained picture of what's happening, and it will help us develop our case better.
Absolutely, and I should say a lot of people, because they do find all this stuff so confusing, because of the language, anti-racism sounds so positive, but it actually has a regressive thing. So your website, Don't Divide Us website, has lots of resources, explanatory materials, that kind of thing, which people can look at and contact you. So what's the website address for that? It's
don'tdivideus.com. Please do have a look at it, find out more about what we're doing. Email us, send us in any questions, any materials that you're not sure whether this is really objectionable or is it not objectionable. And, just get in touch. If we're hearing from parents who, it's not just materials, it's the fact that some teachers are taking it upon themselves to, discipline children differently. So you'll get, a really naughty kid in one corner being really awful to the teacher, and another kid who's, doing the BLM salute for a joke or something in the playground. The kid doing the BLM salute is sanctioned and disciplined and brought in, and all this, really heavily disciplined. But the kids who are really kind of having a fight and openly challenging the authority of the teacher.
That's fine.
Yeah.
OK, so it sounds very much like politics creeping in there.
Very much so.
OK, well, I think I do urge people to check out Don't Divide Us website.